Hey guys, in this video we will be looking at using the MySQL Workbench interface to insert records into our data tables. Now in our previous video we would have looked at how to do it with a script where we specify the database to be used, and then we wrote our keywords and our statements, and we looked at how we can insert one at a time versus many at a time. And you may be looking for a quicker and potentially easier way to do this without having to come in and write up a whole script. There are advantages to the script usage because then you can save the file and you can use it at a later date on maybe even another machine. So that's the advantage to using the script file as it's exportable. But then Workbench also gives us a way to insert records directly without having to write a line of SQL code. And to do that, we can just hover on our table. And in this case, we've been interacting with the students table. So we can just hover on the students table. And then you'll see that you have three icons appearing. And the last one has like a lightning bolt on a table looking icon. So we can click that. And we see that it executes some command that says select from the students. So you'll see that select query now. In a future lecture, we'll break down that select statement. But for now, that query will give you this result grid, which is what Workbench uses to help you insert more records. So here they're actually listing out all of the records that we would have created. And you see that, like I said in the previous video, for each record that was inserted, we get a unique ID. All right, so it's counting. So that means the next one will be 10. And we see all of the data that we would have put in. So if we wanted to create another student at this point, then we could actually just click in this row that has all null values and just start filling in data. So I can say Williams, and I can add a record for myself. I'm not going to tell you when I was born. All right, and this was a typo, but I'm going to leave that because I wanted to see how MySQL handles erroneous records. So I'll just leave this one as null, and then I press enter. So what happens is that when you press enter, it just goes on to the next one. So you can add as many as you need. All right, and then at the end of that process, you have to click apply, and then apply is where it will actually still generate code very similar to what we just wrote, which is just insert into, and then you'll see that it kind of fully qualifies the database name where it says schooldb.students, because the reality is that if you don't have the use statement, then you can actually specify the database dot the table, and that kind of removes the need to have the use statement, because then you know exactly which table in which database is being targeted. All right. And then if we look at the rest of the code, it looks just like what we wrote. All right. Values. And then it puts in the values, including that invalid date. And then if I click apply, then you see that it gets back with an error saying that an incorrect date value was attempted to be inserted. All right, so MySQL is actually doing its own validations on the data based on the data type that you specified. There's no 201st month, so that is just an error. So it knows that it should be year, month, day. So of course it's going to validate before it attempts to put that in. And that's one of the principles of data integrity, because data integrity speaks to having data that matches the needs and matches the standards set up by the designer of the database. All right, so I can just cancel that and make that correction, and I'll just add a few more rows. All right, so I've added a total of 3 rows with fairly consistent data standards, or in keeping with the data standards, not violating the integrity that we're going for. And then I can just click apply, and then you see that instead of doing the multiple insert, it's actually generating 3 different insert into statements. So the thing with the multiple inserts is that if one of them fails, then the whole batch fails, as opposed to doing one by one so that it will run this, and then if this one fails, then it will probably just stop the execution of the script there, allow you to correct this one, and then it will move on. So that's the difference between it. So that's probably why they did it in 3 different statements, to give each insertion command a fair chance, as opposed to clumping them in one statement and failing them all if one is bad. So we can just go ahead and click apply, and we see here that there is still okay, I know what's happening. So this is actually 4-digit year and 2-digit month and then 2-digit day. So I have the 21st month. There is no 21st month. I apologize. So let me try that again. Apply. And I see my error. I should not have put the value null, because null is kind of represented like this. So if I just leave it empty, then it will automatically know that this is a null. So let me try that again. All right, so instead of having a lowercase null, then I'm going to have an uppercase word null, which is actually a keyword, and MySQL is very particular about how it will enter it. So I'm just going to do that. All right, so this is actually a good lesson. So if you want to leave something null, then it's best you just leave it as how MySQL represents it, because by me trying to type in the word null, whether in lowercase or uppercase, or leaving it blank, we see that we're just getting some error here, and the operation is just going to fail. So I'm just going to remove this. So to remove that, you can just click it, click the row, and then right click and say delete row, and then it will remove it from that selection criterion. And then I'll just recreate it down here, just so there's adequate representation. All right, and I'm not going to change that value that is there. And then I'm going to apply once more, and there we go. It was successfully executed. And once we click finish, then we see that the number is incrementing. So you notice that it jumped all the way to 20. And that is because of all the failed attempts to insert. The ID was actually trying to auto increment each time, and then it just kind of associated any failure with a bad ID that's already used, so it just went to the next set of IDs. So all the times I failed just now, it would have gone up by 10, 11, 12, then 13, 14, 15, then 16, 17, 18, all of those failed. And until now, it's at 20, 21, 22, because now it was successful, and the next available number at the time was 20. So that is why these IDs would have jumped. So that is some behavior that you can expect from auto incrementing primary keys. And do remember that the next record will always get the next number that is available while as it counts up. So from this view, you actually have the option to insert records like this. In a grid view, you can change records data right here as long as you click apply at the end. You can also change the view. You can change the form editor that allows you to see it in a nice form view, or fields and their types, so you can see all of the data on the fields. And you can also see query stats. But then this is for later when we start getting into some of the fun querying stuff in our select section. So essentially that's how you would go about inserting records into your table using the MySQL Workbench interface.